political scene and going into the Greens Party?
Okay, so when I was living in Sudan, I grew up under a military dictatorship. I was born 5 years after Omar al-Bashir came into power, and my entire life was political. I think that living as a black woman, as a Muslim woman, I can't actually escape politics.
Yeah.
My entire existence is political. But specifically in an Australian context, I became interested in activism. I volunteered with Amnesty. I worked with UNICEF for a little while, as a fundraiser.
Okay.
And also with the Greens, I remember my first election, and that's what really made me interested. Was I didn't want to vote. I really was over the whole election talk, and I thought, why bother? And I remember my mom telling me how people in our country were fighting and dying for the right to vote and decide their government. It had been about 20-something years under a dictatorship. And I remember being so disillusioned and so disinterested because, you're probably too young to remember this, but in 2013, that rhetoric against asylum seekers and refugees, the Operation Sovereign Borders, and you'll never call Australia home and everything, that just made me feel unwelcome and disengaged. I volunteered with the Greens for the first time because I just wanted to do something. And as I was walking to my polling booth, which was a primary school right near my house, I saw banners and flyers and everything. Every picture had a fence and had "You won't call Australia home," and I'd never felt so unwelcomed in this country. Because Australia, I've grown up here.
Yeah.
It's my home as much as Sudan is. And to be told that people like me, people seeking asylum, people who have made the sacrifice to leave everything behind for the sake of their lives, for the sake of their children, aren't welcome, was just devastating. I remember that after that day, I went home, didn't even know that Tony Abbott had won. I just went home and cried because I'd never felt so scared, I'd never felt so unwelcomed. And I could just remember thinking that what if it was a younger person walking there, someone who was born in Australia and had known this was the country they'd known all their lives. What if they had been walking there, if they had seen that, how would they have handled it? And that impact, the impact of xenophobia and of racism on young people of color. And so I decided to get involved. I started volunteering with the Greens, and in 2016 I ran for the federal election. I was the first Sudanese person to ever run for a federal seat as a Senate candidate, and I was 21, so I was the youngest black woman, African woman, to run for Parliament, which was, I felt
That's amazing, yeah.
I'm actually really proud to be able to open the door for other young people, because that's my passion. My passion is to create spaces for young people of color to survive and to thrive in this country. I feel like we're the future, and we bring a unique perspective because we live, as third culture children from two worlds.
Yeah.
And we reinvent our identity to exist in, as a person between those two worlds. And so I want us to have those spaces. I want us to have those representations in all forms of government, in the arts, in health, in medicine. These are things that we come to this country, we pay our taxes, our children go to school here, this is our home. We deserve to be represented in it.
Yeah.
And sorry about that.
Okay, so why do you think it is that young people are not interested in political processes such as voting?
So removed from the issues that young people face, and they don't know how to bridge that gap, and that's why young people aren't interested, because the politicians that are supposed to represent them aren't engaging them the way that they should. I believe that young people are political and that they are interested in politics if they're engaged the right way.
Yeah.
For example, my siblings are very politically aware, but they're not necessarily going to go out and hand out flyers for a political party. Instead, they're using their activism online. And I do want to differentiate between politics and activism, but also that there are two separate things, but they're not separate things as well. And I think that there are a lot of young people who are active in activist spaces, who are interested in promoting human rights, who aren't necessarily politically engaged, like they're not necessarily inclined to follow a particular political party, and that's okay. It just means that politicians need to find a way to relate to young people more, because in the end, we're the ones who inherit this planet. It's our issues that should be represented. A political party should represent the issues of the people who need them represented the most, and that's young people, because like it's our future. That's those decisions that are made, those are our future. Like when a few years ago they tried to introduce university regulation, fee deregulation in universities, that was our future that they were playing with. These are politicians who all had free education, by the way, and want us to pay $100,000 for degrees. That was a disaster. So I feel like if politicians focused on youth issues, if they consulted young people, if they engaged with young people the way that young people want to be engaged with, then young people would be interested in politics. I mean, you're a young person. What would make you interested in politics?
I mean, for us, for our voice to be heard. I mean, for us to have a say in what goes on. Because like you said, those politicians have had their youth and they've had their lives and they've lived. So making decisions that are going to affect us and not think about us and not hear what we want to say is... mentioned briefly about your experience as a refugee, and that's what encouraged you to get into politics. So could you tell us more about being a refugee and how it was coming to Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that my experience as a refugee is what shaped me. I always say that it wasn't the war that I'm recovering from, but the leaving home. I grew up in a huge family. My parents, my grandparents, a billion aunts and uncles, and you know, when you grow up in that sort of collectivist society and you grow up so surrounded by love and care and your culture, it's so hard to leave that. And when we left Sudan, we left as if we were going for a walk. We left our house, everything was there, took a few bags. It was as though we were going to our grandparents for just, you know, for the weekend, and then we just left. And it was touch and go for a while, us getting out of the country. But leaving as a 7-year-old, like I was 6 turning 7, I didn't think we weren't going to go back. I thought we were going to go back soon. So that realization when we were living as refugees in Egypt, that no, we're not going back, that was devastating. I had this dream every night from the moment we left Sudan of walking down the roads and just walking and turning and then finding my grandparents' house and seeing my entire family there. And I kept having that recurring dream for like nearly a year. And I had it when we came to Australia as well. To be a refugee, to be a child, is leaving, like a child refugee. You leave everything behind before you have a chance to formulate your identity. And then you're in a world that tries to tell you who you are and how you should act. And it's just so tough to find yourself, you know? We left because our country was under a military dictatorship. It was dangerous. There are people still suffering there. People who are suffering because our government enables genocide and actively participates in genocide and ethnic cleansing in areas like Darfur and the Blue Mountains and the Nuba Mountains and Blue Nile regions. And my parents were against the government, and so we had to flee. Like I said, I've always been in a political family, and the defense of human rights, the fact that every person has the right to live a life free from fear, was something that's been in my mind and part of my identity for such a long time that I can't really differentiate it from who I am. Coming to Australia was a bit of culture shock. I came here expecting, you know, white Christmases, all of the snow, and I didn't get snow, which is sad. We got rain though that first day, which was great. And I loved growing up here. I think I've had access to so many opportunities that other people haven't, and I'm so lucky in that. And that's why I'm using that privilege of being in that space to try and create a pathway for people who aren't able to access those spaces, you know? Like I think that as a young person of color, as a third culture child, I'm not living just for myself. I'm also living for my family back home. I'm living for every young person who hasn't had the chance to discover who they are and hasn't had access to opportunities that they deserve living in Australia, or the opportunities that they deserve living in the wider world. I want to fight for their human rights, their right to education, their right to safety, their rights to freedoms that every child deserves. And so
as you know, Mirrabooka is a very diverse community with a lot of different cultures and religions. So, and they also face a lot of challenges. So, how would the Green Party fix those challenges, or like counteract those challenges that people face?
Absolutely. So, yes, absolutely. Mirrabooka is a very diverse community. It's one of the most multicultural communities in Perth. And there are some things that are very unique to that space. So the Greens, in our policy initiatives, we've decided that we have a policy to recognise overseas qualifications, because people shouldn't have to start their lives all over again, you know? When you come here, you want emerging communities to thrive, not just survive. And when we come here, we focus on survival. We focus on finding a place to live, a source of income, sending our kids to school. We don't focus on enjoying all the things that Australia has to offer. And so we want to make it easier for our emerging communities. So recognising overseas qualifications means that more people have a chance to find a job here. We're increasing job opportunities. We want to tackle the housing crisis. Currently, people are waiting 10 years for public housing. That's a disgrace. That uncertainty when you're trying to wait for a house, that puts so much stress on families, especially young families in emerging communities. So we're going to tackle the housing crisis so the wait isn't that long, because the houses are there. We just need a more efficient system. We also want to stand up against discrimination and against xenophobia and racism, because we live in a multicultural society, but at the moment we're facing a really hard time with the rise of the far right and the Islamophobia and the rhetoric that vilifies some of the most visible communities and some of the most vulnerable people in the world. Like I spoke about refugees and asylum seekers and how they're scapegoated by the Australian government. But within Australia, emerging multicultural communities, Muslim people, people of colour, and that's not necessarily different, because a lot of Muslim people are people of colour, are oftentimes the target of racism, of Islamophobia, of that hate, and that shouldn't be the way it is. Australia should be, politics should represent all Australians. An Australian government should be diverse and should address the issues of all Australians, not just a select few, you know? And people should be able to feel safe in their country. People should be able to feel safe walking their kids to school. My friends who wear hijab should be able to feel safe going on public transport and not worried about being attacked. And that's what I want. And the Greens have a plan to tackle the racism and the discrimination that's plaguing our society today. We also want to make services accessible, because like you said, Mirrabooka is a multicultural community. A lot of people speak English as a second language, and that sometimes creates a barrier to the access to services that they need. So we want to have interpreters and translators available for everyone and available free. So a program that's subsidized by the government, but it's available for people to use, so that they don't have that struggle when they're accessing services like Centrelink, or when they're going to a hospital, or when they're going to a job center. They can actually have the same quality of care that everyone else gets.
So I had a look at the Greens website, and something that caught my eye was the solar batteries initiative. So could you please elaborate and tell us more about that?
Absolutely. First off, it's really fantastic to see people engaging with the websites. All of our policies are on the website, and it's always the best place to find our policies. So the Greens, we're the Greens. We care about the environment. We care about renewable energy. And so this initiative is a way to provide affordable renewable energy for low-income houses. We would provide a $5,000 subsidy for houses with an income below $80,000 a year. And this is really fantastic, because the Greens are the only party with a renewable energy target that's fully costed. We want renewable energy in Western Australia by 2030, and we think it's achievable and we think it's affordable. We currently give millions of dollars in subsidies to mining corporations. That money, if gone into renewable energy, would revolutionize this state. It would create so many jobs, and that's the solar battery initiative is one of those initiatives that we're hoping moves that conversation along. To make energy affordable for low-income houses, I think, is really amazing because it gives people a chance to access a space that's usually been so exclusive. You know, like accessing solar panels solar panels are so expensive that if you don't have those funds, it's really tough, even if you want to make that change. So this will help so many families, and it will revolutionize Western Australia. So I really hope that that's a policy that gets through.
I hope it does as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for having this interview with us and speaking with us.
Thank you so much.
One question I'd like to ask, so personally, I'd want to travel to Europe. Where would you want to travel?
Okay, so I have mad wanderlust. Like, I've always wanted to just see the entire world. I made a list of like 24 countries I would love to visit in 2012. Back when I thought, I would love to travel everywhere. I just was recently in Egypt and visited Qatar for a while, and that was really fantastic. It was great to go to Egypt as a tourist, and it was great to see Qatar. I would love to go to Europe. I would love to visit every single museum there is, but I would actually really love to travel around Africa. I would love to go around North Africa and East Africa. I would love to like learn languages. I really, really want to go to Morocco. I really want to go to Somalia, to Kenya, to Tanzania, to Algeria. I'm just all of North and East Africa basically. And I would really love to one day go back home to Sudan. I really would love to see my family. I'd love to see the Nile again. Like when we were in Cairo, we spent New Year's Eve on the Nile, and it was really beautiful, but it wasn't the Nile back home. And that memory, like, you know, the memory of the waves, of the seagulls flying over the Nile, of my uncle fishing in the Nile, those are so ingrained in my mind that I would really, really love to see that again. And I know we were talking about hobbies and making me seem personable and young and cool. I try and pretend to be cool. I'm not that cool, but I'm trying. So I love TV shows. I watch a ton of things on Netflix. I think it was the greatest decision ever for Netflix to come to Australia, and it was devastated when they like blocked the VPNs and we weren't able to watch American Netflix. That was a true tragedy. I love watching stuff by Shonda Rhimes, so Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, Grey's Anatomy, all of those sort of shows. And I'm a huge comic book fan. I learned English by reading comic books.
Wow, that's interesting.
So because, you know, I used to read comic books in Egypt, and it was the only thing that stayed the same. The characters were the same. So I really love the fact that like Marvel movies and TV shows and DC TV shows and movies are a thing now. My 6-year-old self would be like jumping with joy. And the fact that there's characters of color in those shows, the fact that we're gonna have a Black Panther movie in 2018, like how amazing is that? By the way, Marvel, if you see this, please hire me to be an extra on the Black Panther movie. I would be great. Like, it's just so amazing to see the diversity in comics now. Like the Miss Marvel comic series starring a Pakistani American girl, a Muslim woman as a superhero in the forefront of this, like, mind-blowing. And the fact that Captain America was like Sam Wilson, a black man at the forefront and becoming this iconic character, that was amazing. The fact that we had a Luke Cage Netflix TV series, that was just, so I'm very happy at the moment. It's a great time to be alive. And I love astronomy. When I was younger, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Oh, wow.
Like, my two dreams were to be an astronaut or to be the Secretary General of the United Nations, or to be both. So I really loved astronomy. I read a ton of physics books, but the thing I really like is stargazing, most of all, because I remember back in Sudan when it would be like summer, and of course, because of the state of the country, sometimes electricity cuts out, sometimes water cuts out actually too. But when the electricity cut out and there's no aircon or anything, I don't think we even had aircon back then. We had fans. Everyone would just take their mattresses outside and just sleep under the stars. And back then there wasn't that much light pollution.
Yeah.
So I would be sleeping there, my parents and my siblings who were quite young, and my dad would point out the stars and their names and the constellations and tell us the stories. And so for several months at a time I would sleep under the stars. And when we were in Egypt, we used to go to the park and just lay there as a family and just look at the stars, and that's something that stayed for a long time. So I love stargazing. It's something that every time I have a chance to do it, I do it. I once stayed up the night before an exam just to see an eclipse. My parents weren't so happy about that. Never do that, study first. But it was great, because it's just like one of those eclipses that comes every few hundred years.